Hi guys, Sarah here and welcome to Novel Expectations. Today I'm coming to you with another Tuesday Talks. Tuesday Talks is a Goodreads group that was started by Janie over at the Bookworms Buddy and Janelle from Miss J. Rod Reads. This week's question is, what movie adaptations have you enjoyed more than the book? I had a hard time with this one because I'm not a big movie watcher. So for a movie to really blow me away, especially one adapted from a book, would really have to blow me away. So the way I decided to word this was, what movies did you enjoy as much as the books? Not necessarily more. So I have about 5 of them that I want to list here, so I'm just going to try and quickly work through them. So the first one is the Harry Potter franchise. I know a lot of other booktubers are going to talk about this one at length, so I'm not going to bother. Everybody knows it. Fantastic books, fantastic movies. I'm going to leave it at that. Next on my list is Gone with the Wind. The book was written by Margaret Mitchell in 1936, and the movie was released in 1939. The movie was directed by Victor Fleming, and the screenplay was by Sidney Howard. I love this movie. I love this book. I just talked in my weekly wrap-up. It's so funny that this question came up this week, because I just finished reading Gone with the Wind on Friday, and I watched the movie on Saturday, and actually the next video I'm going to film after this, that's going to go up this Thursday, is going to be a book-to-movie comparison of Gone with the Wind. Love, love, love. Yes, they had to condense it quite a bit because it went from a 1,000-page book to a 3.5-hour-long movie, which is still pretty epic, but thoroughly enjoyable. If you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. If you want to hear me talk more about the book and the movie, please check out my video coming on Thursday. Next, the DaVinci Code. The book was written by Dan Brown, and it was published in 2003. The movie was released in 2006, and it was directed by Ron Howard, and the screenplay was by Avika Goldsman. I had no idea this was even directed by Ron Howard. I completely forgot. Now, I read this book when it was released. I remember going into chapters and seeing it as a new release on the shelf and going, oh, what's this about? Reading the back and nothing I've ever read before. I thought, this sounds really good. I loved it. My brother read it after me, then both of my parents read it. Friends of mine have read it. It was fantastic. When we heard there was a movie coming out, my brother and I used to talk at length about who was going to play who. And I think both of us originally were a little disappointed in Tom Hanks as Robert Langdon, but it worked out well. And the movie was fantastically done, stayed true to the book. I really, really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people get upset and they say, well, that's not how I picture the character. Well, yeah, everybody pictures the characters a slightly different way. And the people who produce these movies can't guess what you're going to think of the character. You may have pictured them one way, but they end up being another way, but it works. These directors most of the time know what they're doing and they understand, and this one was fantastic. Next one is Memoirs of a Geisha. The book was written by Arthur Golden and published in 1997. The movie was released in 2005, and it was directed by Rob Marshall, and the screenplay was by Robin Schwickord. Hope I said that right. Love this book. This book was fantastic. One of my goals this year or next year is to reread it. I haven't read it since just before the movie came out, so I must have read it in 2004. So that's got to be 12 years now since I read it. The cinematography in this movie, it was just the costumes, the characters. The book sprang to life on the screen. There were some things missing because I had read the book prior to seeing the movie. My mother had not. And I know that there were a few scenes that my mother was kind of, why are they doing that? Whereas the movie didn't necessarily explain it, but the book does. Always recommend that you read the book prior to seeing the movie. It just makes it that much better. And the last one I want to talk about, and this is maybe a surprise, but I really did enjoy this one. One for the Money. The book was written by Jan Ivanovich and published in 1994. The movie was released in 2012. It was directed by Julie Ann Robinson, and the screenplay was by Stacy Sherman, Karen Ray, and Liz Brixis. When we first heard that this movie was coming out, my mother and I, we squealed with delight because we had been reading the Stephanie Plum series since it was released, so back in 1994. And we used to talk about, oh, if they made a movie, who would play who? And I remember always picturing in my head Stephanie Plum was Sandra Bullock, but Sandra Bullock from Miss Congeniality. Now, for those of you who have read the Jan Ivanovich, these books, Ranger in my head was always The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. And the grandmother was Sophia from the Golden Girls. That's why I always had pictured in my head while reading these books. Well, unfortunately, a lot of time has passed since this book was written to when the movie was released. The grandmother, Sophia, passed away. I'm sorry, I cannot remember. Estelle Getty. She passed away, and Sandra Bullock and The Rock are a little bit too old. They're not old, but they're older to play these characters. At first, when I heard it was Katherine Heigl playing Stephanie Plum, I was kind of, oh. But she did a really good job, and the movie was so cute. It was never going to be an Oscar award-winning movie. It was meant to be fun. I think it did the book justice. It made the fans happy, and that's really what mattered. And it was a really, really adorable story. I know my husband has seen it. My father has seen it. They both really enjoyed it, too. And, you know, I recommend it. If you're looking for a fun, action-y chick flick, definitely check it out. And just for fun, I decided to throw one more in here. And I decided to tell you guys about the worst adaptation that I've ever seen. Book to movie. Confessions of a Shopaholic. Let me give you a little bit of backstory on this one. So I read this book back in 2005. It was my 26th birthday. We were going on a cruise with I was going with my parents and my aunt on a cruise in the Caribbean. Our plane was delayed at Pearson Airport for 8 hours. And I was an avid reader then. I used to read somewhere between 100 to 150 books a year. So I actually was almost done my book, but I figured I was going to be sleeping on the plane. Well, finished the book. Now I've got nothing to read, and I've got 8 hours to kill at an airport. So I wandered over to the airport bookstore, and I found Confessions of a Shopaholic. I read it in about 6 hours. Like, just plopped on the chair, waiting for the plane, page after page. I devoured that book. It was so good. It was so funny. Fantastic. So it was written by Sophia Kinsella, and it was published in 1999. Now, the movie was released in 2009, and it was directed by P.J. Hogan, and the screenplay was by Tracy Jackson, Tim Firth, and Kayla Apatow. I heard the movie was coming out, and I got excited. I'm like, I want to go see it. So then I started seeing, like, the trailers, and I'm like, why isn't she British? The main character is British. It takes place, like, in Britain. But now she was American. I'm like, okay, that's a little weird, whatever. I'll go with it. When I went and saw it in theaters, it was everything not for me. It was everything I could do for me not to actually leave the theater. They brutalized that book. If I were Sophie Kinsella, I would have been embarrassed by it. Not only did they change her to be an American. Now, she was flighty and all that stuff in the book, and I get that, but they changed her to be an American, which I have nothing against that, but that's not how the character was written. It's like taking Bridget Jones and making her American. Does that make sense? So I didn't like that. Plus, they pretty much took the first 3 books and just squished them into one movie. I didn't care for it. I didn't like it. Right off the top of my head, it's probably the worst one I can think of. I'm sure there's a lot that have been really bad, but that's the one that sticks out at the top of my mind. So anyway, guys, do you agree with any of these? Or do you have any favorite book-to-movie adaptations? Because I'd love to hear about them. Please post in the comments below. And I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.